form inside of you. The flow of your body drips off like flower dew. Sure, I know that your stem has a story. Melodies seem to form inside of you. The flow of your body drips off like flower dew. Sure, I know that your stem.
Hi, I'm Effie Barker. We are right here in downtown Los Angeles. When you say we're not going away with these issues, what are those issues? Good evening. Welcome to the special edition of I'm Effie Barker. Hello, Great Britain. Hello, world. Welcome to Effie Barker Human Interest, delving into immigrant stories, their daily life as immigrants here in the United Kingdom. Keep it here on Love the Beat Radio LDBR, keeping you connected around the world. Today, we are delighted to have our guest who was born and raised in Long Beach, California. She first moved here in the UK in 2017 and now living in Surrey with her English husband, with whom they have a little boy. All right, as I mentioned earlier, we have our guest from Long Beach, California. Let's welcome her. Yes, Giustina, right? Giustina.
Yes,
All
Giustina.
right. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for coming to our show. I know you are very busy, a mom of you have a little one, and
Yep.
thank you for squeezing us into your schedule.
Of course, of course. Happy to be here.
Great. So let's start off by telling us about yourself. Like, what were you, where you lived in California? What did you do? Give us a picture of your life before you moved here.
Yeah, so born and raised in Long Beach, California. And prior to moving here, I actually worked for quite some time. I basically ran an athletic training academy for youth athletes. So I
Hmm.
managed a lot of the office work behind the scenes. I did some volleyball coaching as well. And I worked there for about 7 years before I met my now husband and started the transition to moving over here. So, yeah.
So where? How did you meet? He was there. Where did you meet?
Yeah, so he actually has some family that live in Seal Beach, which is just the city right next to where I'm from in Long Beach. And he happened to be there for a wedding. And
Hmm.
as is the now love story, we met on Tinder. And
Interesting.
yeah, we actually started chatting because I was planning a solo trip to England later that year, and so I saw that he was English and thought it would be a good idea to chat and talk about what might be fun to do when I'm in London, and we just really hit it off, and here we are.
Wow, Tinder while he was in the States and
Yeah.
while yeah, interesting. So, did you have any um did you see this coming in your life of marrying someone from miles, thousand miles away?
No. If you had asked me ever if I would ever be living in another country, even another city, I always thought that I would just be in Long Beach forever. So this really is a shock, not only to me, but definitely a shock to my family. Because I love where I'm from, truly. But yeah, it was just as much a surprise to me as it was to everyone I told about it. So yeah.
Right. To which led me to my next question that yeah, I you were born and raised there. You must have had tons of friends there and all of the support that you had from your
hmm
family.
hmm Yeah, that has been difficult. Definitely. I definitely had a core group of friends back home. I mean, we still talk every day. And I've always been really close to my siblings. I have five siblings, so we're all really, really close. So that has been very difficult, and it is difficult making friends as an adult in another country anyways. I've tried really hard in so many different ways. But I think it's I don't know if it's a cultural thing, but I've made some friends through work, um, but I haven't been able to find friendships that are as deep and meaningful and close over here. Really, that's been tough for me, I think.
Mm. How
Yeah.
so how did your family and your friends take the news that you're gonna move? What was the reaction?
Um, my friends were supportive. I mean, one of my friends, her husband is in the military, so they move quite often. So we were kind of used to being relatively long distance anyways. But my family definitely did not take it well. My mom, worst of all, I would say, she and my husband had a contentious relationship for quite some time because of it. Um, but it's taken time, but everyone is pretty used to it now, and we're lucky because they come visit quite often. You know, we see them I see my mom at least, 3 times a year, something like that. So,
Mm.
yeah, I mean, it's been tough. They didn't like it at first, but I think it just took some time to get used to, you know?
Did you say you had how many siblings?
So I have 3 sisters and I have 2 brothers.
No.
So my parents got divorced after they had me and then remarried and they both had more kids. So lot of siblings.
Right, and they were supportive? Your siblings were supportive of you?
Most of them. I One of my sisters was not. She's the one that I lived with her. We lived in the same house growing up, and we were always very, very close. So, um, I think for her, a big part of it was just concern about
Mhm.
it. Because if something were to happen, if, my husband weren't as great as I said he was, they were really far and wouldn't be able to really do much to help. So I do understand why they would be, a bit concerned, but they're all really close now. I mean, they talk to my husband even when I'm not around. So it's definitely gotten better. That's for
That's
sure.
fantastic. But how about you? At that time, when you're preparing, were you excited? Were you looking forward? Were you nervous? Did you feel like concerned as they were?
All of the above. um, I had only come to England a couple of times before I moved here. Um, so it's hard. You can't really know what it's going to be like. Even if you think you know what it's going to be like, it's going to be much different and much more difficult than you imagine. I
Mhm.
think I had this idea that because we speak the same language, that surely it's not going to be very different culturally. But it is vastly different in so many ways. Um, so it took a lot of getting used to. Even, workplace culture is very different. The way people joke is very different. Um, but I didn't know that when I was planning the move, and I think I was mainly excited. I was nervous. The ride to the airport was filled with a lot of tears, and a lot of just worry that, what if I am making the wrong decision? Um, but, it was also I think I also had a lot of pride that I was brave enough to make that decision because I wasn't someone who would take big risks like that really in my life up until that point. So, I think there was nervousness, excitedness, pride, scared, all in equal measures.
Right. But what was the most that really pushed you that you were so decided? Was it because you were in love or
Yeah, I mean, I definitely. I remember so when that first trip when my husband was there, when we had first met, and um, he ended up extending his trip a bit to stay so we'd get more time together. And when it was finally time for him to leave, and I remember taking him to the airport, and I dropped him off, and as I was driving home, because we had just said, okay, well, I mean, I guess we'll just be friends, and we'll just talk when we talk. um, I just don't remember ever feeling a level of that devastation.
Mm.
And it that feeling just didn't go away. And it just got to the point where, a few weeks down the line, we had still been talking all the time. And I just said, I was like, I'm gonna move there. I'm just gonna move there for like 6 months and see how it goes. Um, and so that's what I did. I quit my job and I came to the UK, and um, I stayed with him for a bit, ended up being here for a couple of months. And when I had to go home, we kind of decided that, the only way that I could move here permanently is really if we got married. And so that's what
Mm.
we decided to do. Yeah.
Okay. But you mentioned, I kind of have already have a picture of what your life was. You have your, what is it, four or five, three siblings that
Hmm.
were, some were concerned, some were supportive, and you had friends as well, and your mother was concerned with you, and you had a life, you had a job, and it
Hmm.
would have been, a big leap of faith to go to a whole different country, and the driving factor was really like you were sure, both of you, that you wanted to be together.
Hmm.
And did you have any expectations of what UK is and what UK life would be before you moved?
Um, it's hard to even put my brain back in that space because now it just is normal. But I honestly just felt like it would be pretty much the same, maybe minus the, you know, you don't really hear about gun violence here. So, I the less stressful in that
Right.
aspect. And I was looking forward to the healthcare side of things as well. Um, but I don't know that I had any real expectations on what it would be like other than, I'm gonna need to find a new job and what is that gonna look like?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and even, I didn't even know what our flat was gonna look like when I moved here. I was thinking that was just gonna be kind of the same sort of setup as most apartments back in the States, and even that was vastly different. I don't think I just really thought that it would be, just a continuation of life at home, just with different accents, which I
Now you're
realize
calling it as a
now.
flat.
Yeah, right, I know. And so, looking back on that now, I'm like, that is just so silly that I thought it would just be the same because it is so different. But I think that is really kind of an American mindset that, everyone must do it the way that we do it. And yeah, it's much different than what I thought it would be.
So you came here on what visa? Did you marry there or you married here?
We married in the States,
Mm.
and so I came here on a spousal visa.
Okay. How was that process? Take us through the process. And for those who are listening to us, who are here or in the process of their visa, and people who are planning to move or have just met someone,
Mm.
take us through that process. Was it difficult? How difficult was it?
It was difficult. They they require so much proof um, to validate that your relationship is real.
Legit, legit.
Yeah, legitimate, and that you aren't, just trying to find a way into the country.
We are now back with our guest, Justina. And the last topic that we were talking about earlier was about the process of the documents, right? That you
Yes,
had to
yeah.
go through. And take us back into that time. How hard was it?
It is very hard, and also very expensive. Uh, it because we obviously had never done it before, and most people going into that haven't. We also paid to have a solicitor, um, lawyer, look it over for us, which is expensive in and of itself. But um, there really is not a lot of guidance in layman's terms um, for filling out all the documentation, making sure you have enough evidence, what qualifies as good enough evidence, um, and you have to send off a lot of really important personal documents as well, which is really stressful because you then don't know when you're going to get it back. So, sending off your passport and knowing that you then can't leave the country to go anywhere until you get that passport back. Um, and they give you lengths of time as to, guidance for how long it should take, but it can take much longer than that.
Mm.
Sometimes, when I had to reapply for things during COVID as well, it took even longer. But yeah, it's full on. It's really full on. I think as an American going into that kind of the idea of wanting to move to another country, I don't think I ever realized or ever thought about the hoops that you have to jump through. In my mind, it was just as easy as I want to move somewhere and I'm going to move to that place. And it is not, that's not the case. You have to pay for visas, you have to fill out a lot of paperwork. Sometimes you can't just move to another place unless you get married or unless you're going to uni there. Or you somehow find this mythical employer that will sponsor you to move there, which is very rare. So um, that's kind of the biggest learn for me, is that you can't just move to another country. It's not that easy. Which also gives you another view on, all the people that want to come to the States and how difficult that process truly is for people. So, um, yeah, a lot of learns for that process.
Now that you've gone through that, are you more sympathetic and more understanding of the people that goes through America and or in the UK?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a very liberal person. So, bit of a social justice warrior. In my work now, I run diversity and inclusion for my company. So that's really kind of always been my thing. But having to go through it personally really gives you a whole new lens on the whole process because, we were lucky enough to have the money to fill out that to do that application for a spousal visa. But I just think about the people who meet someone that they love that happens to be a citizen of another country. And what if they don't have the money to apply for that visa to go and be with the person that they love? How horrible must that be to have that be the thing in the way of being with your person?
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, absolutely. It's just being an immigrant and having that as a part of my identity, um, is not something I ever thought would be a part of my identity, and it is. It actually took me a couple of years for me to actually have that sink in that I'm an immigrant, and it's weird. It is a weird one. What I've noticed is a lot of Americans that have moved into the UK, because there's all these Facebook groups and stuff, often refer to themselves as expats. The term immigrant seems to be reserved for others, and I find that to be really interesting. That I think some people feel like there's a negative connotation to that word when really it just is what it is. So I try to really make a point to use the term immigrant when I describe myself because that's what I am. I'm no different than any other immigrant that is moving
Mhm.
to this country. So yeah, it's really made an impact on my identity and kind of how I look at the world and others around me for sure.
So you consider yourself as an immigrant as opposed to be an expat. So do you consider this as your home now? Do you feel that this is your home?
Yeah. Um, I I think, I prefer living here. I think this is a better place to raise a child personally. And it's just a better quality of life, in my point of view. If we lived in the States, we would not have been able to afford to buy a house. We would be paying so much for healthcare. And, I'd have to buy my kid a bulletproof backpack. I don't have the same fears for my child here that I would if I were back home, or the fears that I have for my friends' kids back in the States. Um, this is definitely home now. I mean, Long Beach will always also be home. I feel like I have 2, but I feel at home here now. I found
Hmm.
my place, so.
Right. Take us back at the time when you arrived here.
Hmm.
So you moved, you got up. How long did it take for the spousal visa to get you?
Um, we had some other barriers in the way, but
Mm. Yeah, tell me
the
about it a bit. Tell me
process.
about the barriers.
So I was married before,
Mm,
and it was an abusive relationship.
mm.
So um, when I left, it was kind of, I left my ex-husband when he was at work, and we didn't communicate at all after that, only through my own mom. Um, and we just had a lot of difficulties getting the divorce done, and obviously I had to be divorced from him in order to then marry my husband. So that took quite a while. So it ended up all in all being about a year and a half until I was able to move here. The actual
Oh,
spousal
wow.
visa, yeah, the actual spousal visa itself took 7 months, I think. Um, yeah, about 7 months. But all in all, it took about a year and a half from when we
You
decided that
you
we
were
were going to get married.
separated.
Yeah, I was separated. I had been separated from my ex-husband for a while,
No, I
but we
mean to
just,
your husband
yeah,
physically.
hmm yeah, he would come visit me quite often. He would come, every 6 to 8 weeks and come see me. We're lucky because he is self-employed, so he had that flexibility. And at the time, he was still living with his parents.
Mm,
He did own a flat, but he was renting it out. So he had, the available
mm,
income to come and see
mhm.
me quite often, which is
Oh, you
I'm
were
super
married
grateful
already.
for. No, because we were still waiting. Well, for some of that period we were married, but for some of it I was still waiting for my uh, divorce to
Mm,
be finalized because we had
mm.
to jump through. Yeah, my ex was very difficult with that. So
How frustrating was that to go through that process when you thought that it would just, I could just go there and then, oops, I haven't really finished the documents needed to
yeah,
remarry. And then when
yeah,
you have that, you have to wait another 7 months to get your spouse
hmm
visa.
yeah. It was really frustrating because you don't know when it's going to come. So there I couldn't, buy a flight to know when I was going to be here. We couldn't make any plans for when we were going to move into our flat here. We couldn't make any plans for my life. I had quit my job, so I was doing something different because I knew that I wanted something temporary, and I knew that the job that I had, um, they would need a lot of notice in order to backfill what I was doing because I had been doing that job for so long. So I trained someone to take my place, and then I left there, and I actually taught swim lessons for a while, which I actually really enjoyed. Um, but it was really difficult because I felt like I was just in this holding pattern, just, you know, waiting for the letter to come through to say that I had my spousal visa and I could pack everything and buy a flight and start my next chapter. Um, but I do look back on it and I am grateful for that time because I at the time was living with my grandparents. Um, and so I got a lot of extra time with them, and the temporary job that I had during that time gave me the flexibility to spend a lot of time with them and help them out a lot, which was, I'm really grateful for because they're both passed now. Um, so, I at the time it was really frustrating, but I now look back on it and I think that it was, there were definitely some positives for sure.
Mhm. Was there a point where you just like, I don't want to do this. This is a lot. This is too much. I gave up. You got there was a point that you don't want to do it.
Surprisingly not. Um, you would think that I would get to that point. I mean, there were a lot of times where I would get frustrated and there were definitely a lot of tears and just like uh sadness, and just that feeling of being stuck is really hard. And
You're in
my
limbo.
husband, yeah, just being stuck in limbo, and my husband went through the same thing. We both would go through periods where we're just like, God, is this ever going to end? And we can't. Long distance is so difficult. Um and just feeling separated, especially with the time difference, so it's not like we can talk any time of day. We had to kind of schedule in when we were going to be able to talk to each other. Um, but again, looking back on it now, we say all the time, if we can get through that, then we can get through anything else.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. So take us when you move here already. How was it when you move here? Was it something that you had expected, like what your life would be?
Yeah, I mean, so we
You didn't have your
we
little one yet at the time, didn't you?
no, 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 no. We
Mm.
did not have my little one. So this was about 5.5 years ago. And my little one is a year and a half now. So um yeah, I definitely struggled in the beginning, um, with not just being homesick and missing my family because, my husband's family is amazing. They're great. Um, and they're really kind. They're very different than my family. Um, they're very English. And my family is
Which means
they're my family is very emotional and very open about their emotions. They're very, very affectionate. And my husband's family just isn't that way. Not that that's good or bad, it's just different and not what I'm used to. And
the
so
reserve.
I yeah, yeah. Um, and obviously
Americans
because
are very expressive, it's free spirited.
yes, yes, very open and um so I think I kind of struggled with not, with just having Ryan, my husband, as my like one person that I had here really, that I felt truly comfortable with. Um, and it like I said, it's really difficult to make friends.
Now, when we get back, we will get to know more with our guest, who is from Los Angeles, well, Long Beach, actually, Long Beach, California. Justina Turturro Sutter, she will tell us more about her experience, the bad and the good and the ugly that she had experienced when she moved here, and the best things that happened to her in moving here. Keep it here on Love the Beat Radio, keeping you connected with the immigrant stories around the world.